In the shadowed grip of a winter's eve, where the wind howled like a forsaken soul through the barren boughs, a woman's scream pierced the frosted air. Betwixt the gnarled roots of the ancient Machandelboom, the Juniper Tree, as thou might call it in thy tongue, a pool of blood spread upon the snow, crimson as the heart's deepest fury. Ach, Gott im Himmel, she cried, her voice a tremor of pain and prophecy, for in that fateful slice of her finger upon the apple's peel a wish was born that would unravel lives like threads from a loom. But let us not hasten ahead, dear listener, for the tale begins not in blood's end, but in its promise. Long ago, in a verdant valley of Deutschland, Germany, where the Rhine whispered secrets to the hills, there dwelt a man of wealth and stature, a merchant whose coffers brimmed with silks from the east and spices that teased the nose with forgotten lands. His name was Heinrich, a sturdy soul with eyes like polished oak, and beside him walked his wife Elsa, fair as the morning mist, her piety a beacon in their godly home. They loved one another dearly, as the old ballads sing, yet a shadow lingered. No child graced their hearth. Wilt thou grant us a babe, O Lord? Elsa would pray nightly, her knees upon the cold stone floor, while Heinrich gazed upon the empty cradle with a sigh that echoed through their grand hall. One crisp winter's day, as snow blanketed the earth like a shroud, Elsa stood in their courtyard beneath the Machandelboom. This tree, thou must know, was no ordinary sentinel. Its berries held the scent of gin and magic, revered in ancient Teutonic lore for warding evil and birthing renewal. In low German whispers, elders spoke of it as a bridge betwixt the living and the veiled world beyond. Elsa, peeling a ripe apple with her silver knife, its blade etched with runes from her grandmother's dowry, slipped and the edge bit deep into her finger. Blood dripped upon the snow, mingling red and white in a stark tableau. "Oh," she murmured, her breath a fog, "if only I had a child as red as this blood and as white as this snow." A shiver coursed through her, not from the chill, but from a stirring within, a seed planted by fate's capricious hand. Months passed, and Elsa swelled with life, her belly rounding like the harvest moon. Yet joy was tempered by a creeping malaise. Dreams plagued her of birds with human eyes, pecking at bones in the earth. "Heinrich, mein Liebster," she whispered one night, clutching his hand, "promise me. If I should depart this world, bury me beneath the Machandelboom. There, my spirit shall watch over our child." Heinrich, his heart heavy, vowed it so, though he banished such dark thoughts with laughter. "Thou art strong, Elsa. Our son or daughter shall play in these halls for years to come." Alas, when the birthing hour came amidst thunder that shook the timbers of their home, Elsa brought forth a boy, his skin pale as snow, his lips red as blood. She held him but a moment, gazing into his eyes, blue as the juniper berries, before her strength ebbed away. "Name him Marlene's brother? Nay, call him our joy," she gasped, then slipped into eternal repose. Heinrich wept rivers, the household in mourning, and as promised they laid her to rest under the tree's watchful branches. The Machandelboom seemed to sigh, its needles whispering condolences in the wind. Time, that relentless reaper, marched on. Heinrich, though grief-stricken, could not bear the solitude. In the markets of Cologne he met a woman named Gertrude, sharp of wit and fair of form, with hair like raven's wings and eyes that gleamed with ambition. She came from a lesser house, but her charm wove a spell, and soon they wed. "Thou shalt be a fine mother to my son," Heinrich declared, and Gertrude smiled, though a flicker of envy danced in her gaze when she beheld the boy, now toddling, his laughter filling the halls, where once silence reigned. In due course Gertrude bore a daughter whom they named Marlenchen, little Marlene, a cherub with curls of gold and a disposition as sweet as honeyed mead. Yet as the children grew, a poison took root in Gertrude's heart. The boy, whom they called Ludwig, for his luminous spirit, was the heir to all, the estates, the wealth, the father's undivided love. "Why does he shine so?" she muttered in the dead of night, watching Ludwig play with wooden soldiers carved from juniper wood. Marlenchen adored her brother, sharing secrets and giggles, but Gertrude's favoritism burned like bile. "Mein Kind," she cooed to her daughter, slipping her extra sweets while Ludwig received only stern words and empty plates. Suspense built like storm clouds over the Rhine. Gertrude's jealousy festered, twisted by whispers of old folklore, tales of stepmothers in German Märchen who rid themselves of burdens through cunning. Betwixt love and hate lies but a thin veil, she thought, her mind wandering to the chest in the pantry, heavy with apples from the orchard. Humor, dark and ironic, crept in her musings. Ah, how the mighty fall! For an apple as in Eden's folly, she plotted in shadows, her smiles masking the serpent within. One fateful afternoon, as Heinrich rode to market, leaving the house in quiet, Gertrude called to Ludwig. "Come, boy," she said, her voice honeyed yet laced with steel. "Thy sister hath gone to play. Wouldst thou like an apple from the chest?" Ludwig, innocent as a lamb, skipped to her side. The chest loomed, its lid heavy as judgment. With a gleam in her eye, she lifted it, revealing the fruit's rosy glow. As he reached in, greedy for the treat, crack! The lid slammed down, severing his head clean from his neck. Blood sprayed, red as his mother's long-ago wish, pooling on the floor. Gertrude's heart raced, not with remorse, but with cunning. She propped the head back atop the body, tying a kerchief round the neck to hide the wound. "Now, Marlenchen," she called softly as the girl entered, "go wake thy brother. He sleeps so soundly." Marlenchen, wide-eyed, nudged him. Thud! The head rolled off, tumbling like a forgotten toy. "What hast thou done?" Gertrude wailed, feigning horror. "Thou hast slain him with thy clumsiness. We must hide this, or thy father will never forgive." Tears streamed down Marlenchen's cheeks, her small frame shaking. "But, mother, I did not," she sobbed, the weight of false guilt crushing her spirit. With grim efficiency, Gertrude set to work. She chopped the body, humor's black edge in the absurdity of it, like a butcher preparing sausage for a feast, stewing it into black pudding, spiced with cloves and secrets. The aroma filled the house, masking the deed. When Heinrich returned, weary from the road, she served the meal. "Eat, mein man," she urged. "'Tis a special dish." He devoured it, bones cracking under his teeth, proclaiming, "This meat is tender as sin itself. More, I say." Unbeknownst, he consumed his own flesh and blood, while Gertrude watched with a twisted smile. Marlenchen, unable to bear it, gathered the bones in a silken handkerchief, white as snow, tied with trembling hands. Sobbing, she crept to the Machandelboom, digging a shallow grave beneath its roots. "Here, brother, rest thou in peace," she whispered the earth, swallowing her offering. As the last bone settled, the tree quivered, a mist rising like breath from the grave. And in that tender moment, as the mist curls like a lover's sigh, dear listener, if this tale stirs thy soul, pray, Like this whisper from the branches, share it with kin. Subscribe to these forgotten echoes, that more may hear the roots of our myths revived. For in sharing, we keep the magic alive, without pause as the story unfolds. From the heart of the Machandelboom there burst a sudden flame, not the warm flicker of a hearth, but a cold, blue fire that licked the branches without consuming them. Out of that unearthly blaze rose a mist, thick as grief, swirling betwixt earth and sky, and in its midst a shape took form, a bird, glorious and terrible, with feathers that gleamed like polished gold and eyes that burned with a knowing too ancient for any creature of feather and claw. "Kiwit! Kiwit!" it cried, a sound that pierced the soul like a silver needle. And little Marlinchen, still kneeling in the frost-kissed earth with dirt beneath her nails, felt her heart stop betwixt beats. But come closer, listener, and I shall tell thee how this marvel came to pass, for the tale coils onward like the Rhine in flood. The night after Marlinchen buried the bones, the household lay in uneasy quiet. Heinrich, the father, sat by the fire, his belly full of that cursed black pudding, gnawing idly on a bone he had saved, aye, a bone of his own son, though he knew it not. "Gertrude," he called, his voice thick with contentment, "never hast thou cooked a dish so rich. 'Twas as though the meat melted on the tongue, seasoned with some secret spice of thine." Gertrude, pale as chalk beneath her forced smile, inclined her head. "A new recipe, mein Gemahl," she murmured, "one I shall not soon repeat." In her heart a cold knot tightened. The deed was done. Yet guilt gnawed at her like a rat in the cellar, and she feared the very shadows that danced upon the wall. Marlinchen could not eat. She sat in her small chamber, the silken handkerchief now empty, clutched to her breast. Tears fell like winter rain. "Bruder," she whispered to the darkness, "forgive thy foolish sister. I struck thee, though I knew not what I did." In her mind's eye she saw again the head rolling across the floor, the eyes still wide with surprise, and she pressed her fist to her mouth to stifle a scream. Sleep fled from her that night, and when at last dawn bled pale across the sky, she crept from her bed and ran to the Machandelboom. The tree stood sentinel as ever, its branches heavy with frost, yet something had changed. The earth above the buried bones was disturbed, as though a mole had burrowed in the night. Marlinchen fell to her knees, heedless of the cold that bit through her nightgown. "Bruder," she breathed, "art thou at peace?" Then came the mist, slow at first, curling from the roots like steam from a cauldron. It smelled of juniper berries crushed underfoot, sharp and resinous, mingled with something sweeter, like the blood of the long-ago wish. The flames followed without warning. Blue they were, and cold, dancing along the trunk and branches, yet leaving no scorch. Marlinchen scrambled back, her breath hitching. "God im Himmel, what sorcery is this?" she gasped. From the heart of the fire stepped the bird. No, not stepped, but unfolded as though the mist itself wove feathers of gold and scarlet. Its breast was white as snow, its wings tipped with crimson, and when it spread them, the morning light shattered into 1,000 shards. "Kiwit! Kiwit!" it sang again, and the sound was both beautiful and terrible, like a lullaby sung at a graveside. Marlinchen's fear melted into wonder. "Bruder," she whispered, daring to hope. The bird cocked its head, regarding her with eyes that held the blue of Ludwig's own, eyes that knew her, loved her, forgave her. A single tear, bright as a dewdrop, fell from its beak and struck the earth, where it sizzled and vanished. Then the bird opened its beak and sang, not in the twittering of birds, but in a voice clear as a boy's, yet richer, threaded with sorrow and vengeance. Min moder, de mi schlachtet, min vader, de mi at, min svester, de marlinichen, sucht mi al mi binnichen, bond sie up in jenen silk, legt sie den Machandelboom, Cuvit, wat een schöne Wagelbünig. My mother, she slaughtered me. My father, he ate me. My sister, little Marlinchen, sought out all my bones, bound them up in silken cloth, laid them beneath the juniper tree. Tweet, tweet, what a beautiful bird am I! The words hung in the air like frost, each syllable a dagger aimed at the house beyond. Marlinchen clapped her hands to her ears, yet the song burrowed into her heart. Brooder! She cried, reaching out. The bird dipped its wings in farewell, then launched skyward, trailing sparks of blue fire that winked out like dying stars. Inside the house, Gertrude stood at the window, her knuckles white upon the sill. She had seen the mist, heard the cry of Kaiwit. Though the words of the song reached her not, a chill seized her, colder than any winter. What devilry haunts the tree? She muttered, crossing herself thrice. Yet pride armored her heart. She would not confess, not even to the priest. The boy is gone, she told herself, and none shall know how. But in the quiet hours when the fire burned low, she fancied she heard the crunch of bones betwixt teeth, her husband's teeth, and her stomach turned. Heinrich, for his part, felt a strange restlessness. The meal sat heavy within him, though he craved more of its flavor. "Wife," he said one evening, tossing another log upon the fire, "I dream of Ludwig. He stands beneath the Machandelboom, calling to me, yet when I reach him he crumbles to dust." Gertrude laughed, a brittle sound like ice cracking. "Dreams are but vapors, mein Liebster." The boy ran away as children do. "Forget him." But Heinrich could not forget. A hollow ache grew where love for his son had dwelt. Days passed, and the bird, our golden bird, flew far from the valley. Over hedgerows and frozen streams it soared, until it came to the town where goldsmiths hammered and shoemakers stitched. There, perched upon the sign of a master goldsmith, it began to sing once more. "Min moder, de mi schlachtet, min vader, de mi at." The goldsmith, a stout man named Klaus with arms like oak beams, stepped out to listen. "By the saints," he exclaimed, "never have I heard a bird sing words, and such sorrow in its voice." The song ended with the triumphant, "Kiewit, Kiewit, wat een schöne Wagelbünig," and Klaus felt tears prick his eyes. "What wouldst thou, fair creature?" he asked. The bird regarded him steadily. "A chain," it seemed to say, though no words were spoken, "a golden chain for my father." Klaus, moved by pity or enchantment, he knew not which, returned within and wrought a chain of finest gold, links delicate as spider's silk, yet strong as oath. When he held it out, the bird seized it gently in its beak and flew away, leaving Klaus staring after it, wondering if he had dreamed. Next, the bird came to the shoemaker's shop, where leather hung in fragrant strips and children peered from doorways. Again it sang, its voice threading through the market square like a lament. The shoemaker, a kindly widow named Greta, wiped her hands upon her apron and listened. "Poor thing," she murmured when the song was done. The bird tilted its head and she understood. Red shoes, bright as blood upon snow, for a little sister who weeps. Greta worked through the night by candlelight, stitching shoes of softest crimson leather, adorned with tiny silver bells that tinkled like laughter remembered. At dawn, she set them upon the window sill, and the bird took them tenderly, brushing her cheek with a wing that smelled of juniper and distant fire. Last of all, the bird flew to the mill upon the hill where great stones ground wheat to flour and millers labored in clouds of white dust. There it perched upon the highest beam and sang its terrible song anew. The millers, 3 brothers, rough and hearty, stopped their work, transfixed. "What manner of bird is this?" cried the eldest. "It sings of murder and bones." The youngest, more tender-hearted, felt dread coil in his belly. When the song ended, the bird fixed them with its burning gaze. No words passed, yet the message was clear. A millstone, heavy and round, for one who deserves crushing. The brothers exchanged glances, half in fear, half in awe. "If this be witchcraft," said the middle brother, "best we give what is asked and be done." Together they lifted a great millstone from the pile, gray and pitted, heavier than sin, and rolled it into the yard. The bird grasped a rope tied round it. How such a creature lifted such weight none could say, and with mighty beats of its golden wings bore it skyward, vanishing into the clouds. Back toward the valley it flew, the millstone trailing beneath like the pendulum of doom. Suspense hung thick as the bird approached the house beneath the Machandelboom. Marlinkin sat in the garden, pale and listless, her eyes ever upon the tree. Heinrich worked in his study, counting coins yet finding no joy in them, and Gertrude stood at the hearth stirring a pot of stew she had no taste for. When the shadow of wings darkened the window, the bird perched upon the Machandelboom itself, the millstone swaying gently. Then, with a cry of "Kaiwit! Kaiwit!" it began to sing once more, louder, clearer, the words ringing through the valley like a judgment bell. The bird's voice rang out across the valley like a church bell tolling judgment, each note sharp enough to cut flesh. "Kaiwit! Kaiwit!" it began, perched high in the Machandelboom, the millstone swaying beneath it like the sword of Damocles over the house. The words poured forth, clear and merciless, carrying through open windows and closed hearts alike. "Min moder, de mi schlachtet, min vader, de mi at, min Schwester, de Marlenischen, sucht mi all mi Benichen, bond sie ab in seinen Silk, legt sie an den Machandelboom. Küvit, küvit, wat in schöne Wagelbön ich. My mother, she slaughtered me. My father, he ate me. My sister, little Marlenchen, sought out all my bones, bound them up in silken cloth, laid them beneath the juniper tree. Tweet, tweet, what a beautiful bird am I!" Heinrich, bent over his ledgers in the study, froze as though struck by lightning. The quill slipped from his fingers, splattering ink across parchment like fresh blood. The voice. He knew that voice, though it came from no human throat. "Ludwig," he whispered, his heart pounding against his ribs. He stumbled to the window, flinging it wide. There, golden against the darkening sky, sat the bird, radiant and terrible. Inside the kitchen, Gertrude dropped the wooden spoon into the pot with a clatter. The song pierced her like a blade betwixt the shoulders. She knew those words, though sung in the old low German of her childhood, the dialect her own grandmother had used when telling grim tales by the fire. "Nein," she hissed, clutching the edge of the table. "It cannot be." Her face drained of color, eyes wide with the terror of the damned. She had buried the secret deep, convinced none would ever unearth it. Yet here it was, sung aloud for the world to hear. Marlinkin, sitting on the garden bench with her small hands folded in sorrow, lifted her head. The song reached her not as accusation, but as embrace. "Bruder!" she cried, leaping to her feet and running toward the tree. Tears of joy streamed down her cheeks, for she alone understood the truth. This was no ordinary bird, but Ludwig returned, transformed by the ancient magic of the Machandelboom. The bird ceased its song for a moment, cocking its golden head toward the house. Then, with deliberate grace, it released the golden chain from its beak. The links shimmered as they fell, catching the last rays of the sun, and landed with a soft chime around Heinrich's neck. He caught it instinctively, staring in wonder. "What marvel is this?" he murmured, turning the chain in his thick fingers. It was warm to the touch, pulsing faintly like a living thing. A strange peace settled over him, as though a missing piece of his soul had been returned. "Kaiwit! Kaiwit!" the bird sang again, softer now, almost tender. Heinrich stepped into the garden, drawn inexorably toward the tree. "Sing once more, beautiful creature," he called, his voice thick with emotion. "Never have I heard such music." The bird obliged, repeating its haunting refrain. Heinrich listened, and with each verse the fog in his mind began to lift. Memories surfaced, Ludwig's laughter in these very gardens, the boy's small hand in his, the strange richness of that final meal. His brow furrowed. What do these words mean?" Gertrude burst from the house like a storm, her skirts whipping about her legs. "Away, cursed thing!" she shrieked, hurling a stone at the tree. It struck the trunk with a dull thud and fell harmlessly to the ground. The bird merely regarded her with those burning eyes, unblinking. "Gertrude," Heinrich said, turning to her in confusion. "What ails thee, wife? 'Tis but a bird, and a wondrous one." "Drive it away," she cried, her voice cracking. "It brings evil upon us." But even as she spoke, the bird opened its beak and dropped the red shoes, bright as fresh spilled blood, adorned with tiny silver bells that tinkled like distant laughter. They landed at Marlinchen's feet. The girl gasped, picking them up with reverent hands. "For me?" she whispered. She slipped them onto her feet, and they fit as though crafted by angels. When she took a tentative step, the bells chimed sweetly, and she laughed through her tears, a sound that had not graced the house since Ludwig's disappearance. Heinrich watched his daughter dance in the fading light, the golden chain heavy against his chest, and something dark began to stir in his memory. "Gertrude," he said slowly, "where is my son?" "Truly." "Where is Ludwig?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Gertrude's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came. The bird fixed her with its gaze and began the song anew, louder this time, each word a hammer blow. "Min Mutter, de mich schlachtet." She clapped her hands over her ears. "Lies!" she screamed. "Filthy lies from a devil's beak." Yet her knees buckled, and she sank to the ground, rocking back and forth. The servants, drawn by the commotion, gathered at the windows. Wide-eyed cook, trembling maid, the stable boy with mouth agape. They heard the song, understood fragments in their native Plattdeutsch, and whispers began to spread like wildfire through dry grass. Marlinchen approached her father, the red shoes glinting. "Vater," she said softly, "the bird speaks truth. Ludwig is in the bird." Heinrich stared at her, then at the creature above. The golden chain seemed to burn against his skin now, branding him with realization. "What sayest thou, child?" he demanded, his voice rough. Before Marlinchen could answer, Gertrude lurched to her feet. "The girl is mad with grief," she spat. "She imagines things. The boy ran away. Thou knowest this." But her eyes darted wildly, betraying her. Heinrich stepped closer to her, the chain swinging like a pendulum. "Thou hast never spoken true about his leaving," he said quietly. "No note, No trace. And that meal, that cursed meal thou fed me. His face darkened. What was in that black pudding, Gertrude? The bird cried. Kiwit! Kiwit! Once more, triumphant, and the millstone swayed ominously. Gertrude saw it then, the great grey weight hanging above her like fate itself. Terror seized her fully. She turned to flee into the house, but her feet tangled in her skirts, and she fell hard upon the path. Heinrich advanced upon her, grief and rage warring in his eyes. Speak, woman, what hast thou done to my son? Marlenchen stood between them, small, but unafraid, the red shoes gleaming. She tricked me, father, she said, her voice steady despite the tears. She made me think I had hurt him, but it was her. It was always her. The servants murmured louder now, crossing themselves. The cook, an old woman who remembered Elsa's kindness, spat upon the ground near Gertrude's feet. Hexie, she muttered. Witch. Gertrude scrambled backward on hands and knees, her fine gown tearing on the stones. Mercy, she gasped. I did it for us, for Marlenchen. The boy would have taken everything. The confession spilled from her like poison from a lanced wound. Heinrich recoiled as though struck. Thou killed my son, my Ludwig, and fed him to me? His voice broke, and he fell to his knees, the golden chain clattering against the path. Above them, the bird spread its wings wide, the millstone trembling in its grasp. The air grew thick with anticipation, the scent of juniper heavy and cloying. Marlenchen looked up at her brother in feathered form, love and sorrow mingling in her gaze. Do what thou must, she whispered. The bird's eyes blazed like twin suns. With a mighty cry, Kiwit! It released the millstone. It fell straight and true, a grey thunderbolt from the heavens, hurtling toward the crouching figure of Gertrude. She looked up at the last moment, her scream cut short as the massive stone struck her with a sickening crunch. Bone shattered, flesh burst, and blood, red as the long-ago wish, spattered across the path like scattered rose petals. Silence fell, broken only by the soft rustle of the Machandelboom's branches and the distant tinkling of Marlenchen's silver bells. Then, from the midst of the mist that rose anew, thicker now, shot through with golden light, the bird descended. It landed gently before the weeping family, folding its wings. Before their eyes, feathers melted into flesh, gold into skin, beak into mouth. There stood Ludwig, whole and living, his eyes the same bright blue, his hair tousled as ever. Vater, he said simply. Schwester. Heinrich rose on shaking legs and crushed his son to his chest, sobs racking his broad frame. Marlenchen threw her arms around them both, the three of them clinging together as though they might never let go. The servants wept openly now, some falling to their knees in prayer, others crossing themselves repeatedly. The Machandelboom stood silent witness, its branches still as though satisfied with the justice wrought beneath its boughs. In the hush that followed the millstone's thunderous fall, a crimson mist rose from the crushed form of Gertrude, swirling betwixt the roots of the Machandelboom like the breath of a dying curse. Ludwig, newly restored in flesh and bone, stood frozen amid the tableau, his father's arms a vice of joy and horror, Marlenchen's small hands clutching his sleeve as though he might dissolve into feathers once more. The air thrummed with unspoken dread. Had the vengeance truly ended, or would the tree demand more blood for its ancient magic? Bruder, Marlenchen whispered, her voice a thread in the wind, art thou truly returned, or is this but a dream spun from sorrow? Nay, listener, This was no fleeting illusion, but the raw wound of rebirth, where joy and terror danced hand in hand. Let us delve deeper into the shadows of that fateful eve, for the tale unwinds further, its threads woven with the resilience of those who survived the storm. The servants, who had watched from afar like ghosts at a banquet, crept forward now, their faces a mosaic of awe and fear. The old cook, her apron stained from years of toil, crossed herself thrice and muttered, "Gelobt sei Jesus Christus. Praise be Jesus Christ for this miracle, though it reeks of pagan fire." She eyed the Machandelboom warily, remembering tales from her Westphalian youth, how the juniper guarded graves and birthed spirits, its berries a potion for both healing and hex. "The boy lives," she announced to the gathering crowd. Stable hands, maids, even the gardener with his spade still in hand. Whispers rippled through them like wind through needles. "The Vogel! The bird! It was he! Die Stiefmutter! The stepmother! Crushed like grain under stone!" Heinrich, his broad shoulders heaving with sobs, released Ludwig at last and turned to the ruin upon the path. Gertrude's body lay mangled beneath the millstone, her raven hair fanned out like spilled ink, her eyes, once sharp with envy, now vacant as forgotten wells. A dark humor twisted in his mind amidst the grief. How fitting that she, who had ground his son into stew, should meet her end under a grinder's weight. "Ach Gott," he groaned, sinking to one knee, "what horrors have befallen this house?" Yet mingled with revulsion was a grim relief. The poison that had festered since Elsa's death was purged, though at what cost? Ludwig, his skin pale as the snow of his mother's wish, touched his neck absently where the kerchief's ghost lingered. "Vater," he said, his voice steady, yet laced with the echo of birdsong. "Fear not. The tree hath given me back, as it took Mutter, my true Mutter, into its embrace." He glanced at the Machandelboom, its branches still, yet seeming to pulse with inner life. Marlenchen nodded, her red shoes tinkling softly as she shifted. "The song told all," she added, "and justice is done." But suspense clung to the air like fog over the Rhine. As dusk crept in, painting the valley in shades of bruised purple, Heinrich ordered the servants to action. "Remove this abomination," he commanded, gesturing to the millstone. The stable boy and gardener heaved together, muscles straining, but the stone budged not an inch, as though rooted by the tree's will. "Verflucht! Cursed!" the gardener spat, wiping sweat from his brow. They fetched ropes and livers, the scene absurd in its futility, grown men grunting like beasts at a fair while the children watched with wide eyes. At last, with a groan like the earth's complaint, the stone rolled free, revealing the flattened remains. The cook clucked her tongue. "Bury her far from here," Heinrich decreed, lest her spirit poison the ground. As night deepened, the family retreated indoors, the golden chain still about Heinrich's neck, a talisman of the bird's gift. They gathered by the hearth, where flames crackled mockingly, casting shadows that danced like accusing fingers. Ludwig recounted his tale, not in hurried words, but with the deliberate rhythm of one who had flown above the world. "When the lid fell," he began, "darkness swallowed me whole. Yet I awoke in mist and fire, my bones knit anew by the tree's whisper. Machandelboom, it called in the old tongue, Juniper, guardian of the threshold." Marlenchen leaned close, her bells chiming faintly. "I buried thee with love," she said, "and thou returned as beauty from ashes." Heinrich listened, his face a storm of emotions. "Thy stepmother, Gertrude. She was not always thus," he murmured, staring into the fire. "Once she laughed like bells at market, her eyes bright with promise, but envy twisted her as thorns choke the rose." A touch of dark humor surfaced. "And to think I praised her cooking! If only I had known the secret ingredient." Ludwig chuckled softly, a sound like wind through feathers, easing the tension. "Vater, thou ate heartily. Perhaps 'twas thy love that sustained me even then. Yet beneath the levity lurked deeper currents." Marlinchen fidgeted, her gaze darting to the window where the Machandelboom loomed in moonlight. "What if she returns?" she whispered. "In dreams, or as shadow?" Ludwig placed a hand on hers. "Nay, Schwester, the millstone sealed her fate. But we must honor the tree. Its magic is old, rooted in the soil of our forebears." He spoke of visions from his avian form, flying over ancient forests where Teutonic tribes offered berries to gods, whispering charms against evil. In Scandinavia they call it enneber, juniper, and weave it into sagas of rebirth like Hagbard and Signa, lovers parted by death yet reunited in spirit. The night wore on, suspense building with every creak of the house. A knock at the door startled them, the village priest, summoned by a wide-eyed servant. Father Anselm, a gaunt man with eyes like coals, entered bearing a crucifix. "Heinrich," he intoned, "word spreads like plague. A bird of fire, a woman crushed, a boy risen." He eyed Ludwig suspiciously. "Is this God's work or the devil's?" Heinrich rose, the golden chain glinting. "Come, see for thyself." They led him to the garden, where the Machandelboom stood bathed in silver light, its berries glistening like eyes. Father Anselm circled the tree, murmuring Latin prayers. "In nomine Patris." Yet, as he touched the trunk, a shiver ran through him. "This place hums with power," he admitted. "Not unholy, but ancient betwixt heaven and the old ways." He blessed the ground, sprinkling holy water, and declared the miracle divine. "Bury the woman with rites," he advised, "and give thanks." As he departed, the family felt a weight lift, though questions lingered. Would the village shun them as cursed, or hail them as blessed? Days turned to weeks, the household healing like a scarred wound. Ludwig, stronger now, roamed the orchards, his laughter mingling with birdsong. Marlinchen danced in her red shoes, the bells a reminder of grace amid horror. Heinrich managed his affairs with renewed vigor, the golden chain a symbol of fortune restored. Yet subtle twists emerged, modern echoes in this ancient tale. Neighbors whispered of family rifts, jealousies that festered unspoken, mirroring Gertrude's fall. "Beware the stepmother's shadow," they said, drawing lessons for their own hearths. One eve, as autumn leaves fell like golden feathers, Ludwig climbed the Machandelboom's branches. "Bruder, take care," Marlenchen called. He plucked a berry, crushing it betwixt fingers, the scent sharp and evocative. Visions flickered, Elsa's smile, Gertrude's envy, the bird's flight. "The tree speaks still," he said, descending. "It warns of balance, love and hate, life and death, entwined as roots." Suspense crested anew when a traveler arrived, a storyteller from distant France, bearing tales of Bluebeard and beasts. Hearing their story, he nodded sagely. "Thy Machandelboom echoes our lore," he said in accented German. "In Bretagne, trees guard secrets, birthing vengeance." He shared wine and words, weaving humor into the grim. "Ah, but in my land, the father would eat the stew and ask for seconds, nah?" Laughter echoed, binding wounds further. Yet as winter approached, a final test loomed. Dreams plagued Heinrich. Gertrude's voice, whispering accusations from the grave. "Thou loved me not enough," she hissed. He awoke sweating, seeking solace under the tree. There, in the snow, he found a single red apple, uncanny in the frost. Biting into it, he tasted not poison, but peace. "Forgive," the wind seemed to say. Thus the family forged onward, the Machandelboom, their eternal guardian. Beneath the silver shroud of a full moon, where shadows stretched long like fingers from the grave, the Machandelboom stirred once more, not in fury, but in quiet benediction. A single berry, plump and dark as a secret, fell from its highest bough, striking the earth with a soft plop that echoed through the sleeping valley. In that instant, the ground trembled faintly, as though the roots themselves whispered a final vow. From blood we rise, from bone we thrive. Heinrich, roused from fitful slumber by the sound, rose from his bed and stepped into the night, his breath fogging the air like a prayer unspoken. "What more dost thou ask of us, old friend?" he murmured to the tree, his hand upon the trunk, feeling the pulse of ancient life beneath the bark. But listener, this was no mere tremor of the soil, but the culmination of the tale's weaving, a tapestry of loss and legacy, where the scars of yesterday bloom into the strength of tomorrow. Let us walk this final path together, through the thorns and triumphs, for the Machandelboom's story ends not in silence, but in the enduring song of the heart. The morning after the berries fall dawned crisp and clear, the frost etching filigree upon the windows of the merchant's house. Heinrich gathered his children in the great hall, where tapestries of hunts and harvests hung like guardians against the chill. The golden chain still graced his neck, a constant weight, now more talisman than trinket. "Ludwig, Marlinchen," he said, his voice rough from tears long shed, "we stand at a crossroads. The tree hath given us back what was stolen, but it bids us remember, life is no straight furrow, but a winding Rhine betwixt light and shadow." Ludwig, his frame filling out with the vigor of youth reborn, nodded solemnly. The avian grace lingered in his movements, a subtle tilt of the head, a gaze that pierced like a bird's. "Vater, I flew over villages and forests in my feathered guise," he recounted, his words flowing with the rhythm of wind through wings. "I saw envy fester in hearths like mold on bread, stepmothers glaring at sons not their own, fathers blind to the serpents in their midst. In Germany, in France, even across the cold seas to Scandinavia, the tales are kin. The black bull of Norway, where a sister braves the underworld for her brother, or Hagbard and Sina, hanged for love yet avenged by flames. Our story is but one branch of the great tree of myth. Marlinchen, perched on a stool with her red shoes dangling, kicked her feet idly, the silver bells tinkling like chimes of forgotten joy. "But, Bruder," she interjected, a spark of childlike humor lighting her eyes, "if every tale ends with a millstone, who dare wed a merchant's widow?" Laughter bubbled from them all. Heinrich's a deep rumble, Ludwig's light as a feather's brush. In that mirth, the darkness receded further, a reminder that even in Grimm's shadowed woods folly finds its fool's cap. Yet suspense wove through their days like ivy on the Machandelboom's trunk. Word of the miracle had spread beyond the valley, carried by traders along the Rhine's misty bends. Pilgrims arrived first in trickles, a bent crone from the Black Forest, clutching a rosary of juniper beads, a young couple from Cologne, seeking blessing for their barren hearth. "Tell us of the bird," they begged, clustering in the courtyard. Heinrich, ever the merchant, welcomed them with spiced wine and bread, though weariness etched his brow. "The tree guards its own," he would say, gesturing to the sentinel that loomed over all. "Touch not its roots, lest ye wake what sleeps."